All right, all you A-Push people. So in this video, we're going to unpack the thinking of two very important people back at the founding. We're going to talk about Jefferson on the one hand, Hamilton over on the other hand, because the disagreements that these guys had and the competition between them has been called the rivalry that forged a nation. And I think we can make the argument that it's not just about how the nation got started, it's about our nation today. That a lot of their arguments are still around in some form today in modern politics. So we're going to call this video Jefferson versus Hamilton, a live argument started by dead guys. We're going to start with one of those guys, Jefferson over on the left. We're going to put Hamilton over here on the right, and that's kind of sort of ish on purpose-y, kind of making the connection to modern politics-ish. And we're going to run down a number of issues. We're going to talk about which party each of them is considered responsible for. We're going to talk about which country each of them wanted us to be allied with. We're going to talk about how they wanted the Constitution interpreted, what they thought our economy should be based on. We're going to talk about the level of government that they wanted to have more power. And finally, we're going to finish up with what they feared most in the political system. So let's get this started. When we talk about parties, I know your book calls Jefferson's party the Democratic-Republicans, and they will come to be called that more commonly. But the earliest documents make more references to just the Republicans, so you should probably know both names. Speaking of things you should know, those are not the same Republicans as today's party. Those Republicans can only date themselves back to 1850. On the other side, Hamilton's party is the Federalists. And we're going to throw another asterisk in very quickly. These are not the same Federalists as from the Federalist versus Anti-Federalist debate in the ratification of the Constitution. A lot of the Anti-Federalists refuse to participate. The ones that do are likely to be Republicans, but so are some very strong original Federalists, like Madison himself, who once it's no longer Federalist versus Anti-Federalist, now it's Federalist versus Republicans. Madison is going to be Jefferson's top lieutenant in the Republican Party. So neither the Republicans nor the Federalists are the people that you think of first when you hear those names. When it comes to the country to be allied with, a brand new baby country needs a big friend somewhere out there in international diplomacy. Jefferson wants that country to be France. Jefferson thinks it's a very natural alliance because they were the ones who helped us out the most in the Revolution. He spends time as our ambassador to France. He thinks that France's interests ally most closely with ours and that the friendship should stay strong. On the other hand, a little strangely for some U.S. history students, and a little strangely for a lot of people who lived back at the time, Hamilton wants us to be allied with Britain. Basically like to have commercial treaties with them to be as strong as we could, but also to follow Britain's example as much as we could. Because for Hamilton, he wants the United States of America to become a rich, influential country. And he looks around, who's the richest, most influential country? It's Britain. So if we want to just follow their example, we'll get rich and influential too, is a generality of the line of thinking. Now, the way they interpret the Constitution is going to become important as well. We're going to call the Jeffersonian way of interpreting the Constitution strict construction. It means looking at the document and saying, does it say you have the power to do this? Because if it doesn't actually say it, then you can't. That's going to make life interesting for President Jefferson when the opportunity of the Louisiana Purchase comes along, but we're going to talk about that in period 4. Hamilton is willing to be much more loose with the powers and look at that necessary and proper clause that says if you have a goal that the Constitution says you're allowed to have, then other little things along the way that help you achieve that goal that may not be mentioned by the Constitution, well, those are still okay. This is going to be the big line of reasoning Hamilton is going to use for his Bank of the United States, which we read about recently. When it comes to the economy, Jefferson is going to see not just that the United States and the land that we have can make us an agricultural powerhouse. He was right. We are still one today. But Jefferson also believes that the patience that you learn from farming and not living in bustling cities is actually going to lead to less corruption. So Jefferson wants our economy to be based on agriculture. Hamilton, of course, is the money guy, and he looks around, what can make us the most money? It's going to be the newer things that are happening, like finance and manufactures. And so Hamilton sees commerce as the way to get the riches that will make us influential. The level of government that each of them favored, you probably remember from the debates over the Constitution. Jefferson wants the state governments to have significant power because Jefferson thinks it's easier for people to affect what their state government does than it is for them to affect some great big national government further away. That when Virginia is allowed to make most of its decisions for itself, it'll be fine. But when Virginia is only one voice among 13, and it looked pretty soon like it would be more, that would dilute the power of Virginia, which he felt is more easily influenced by the people who live there. Hamilton, on the other hand, was one of the people who looked around at the weak national government that was under the Articles of Confederation and said, this is the root of all of our problems. And so we need a strong national government, number one, so we don't go back to being like that. But number two, Hamilton's got big plans for this country. And he thinks somebody needs to be the driver, and he thinks that level of government needs to be the national government. So as we finish off this video with the fear that each of them had, Thomas Jefferson fears what we're going to call tyranny. Maybe not necessarily a single tyrant like the king, like back during his Declaration of Independence times. We're basically just saying Thomas Jefferson fears too much power being collected in one spot, whether that spot is a person or whether that spot is a level of government. On the other hand, what Hamilton fears is mob rule. Hamilton looks around at things like Shays' Rebellion. Hamilton looks around at things like the Whiskey Rebellion and says, the only thing that's going to keep us from getting where we need to go is constantly having to deal with these little mini rebellions. Hamilton is a bit of an elitist who thinks that we need the smartest and the best people to be running our plans, and that a lot of common folks can't really understand them. And so when we start letting them vote on things in big numbers, they might say, well, we don't want those big plans. And so Hamilton, his biggest fear is the rule of the mob. I think this is a pretty decent chart to help you keep track of who's on what side of each of these issues in the great big Jefferson-Hamilton debate.